Blog Talk Radio.
And good evening, everybody, and thank you for listening to King Jordan Radio for May 6th, 2013. Now, ladies and gentlemen, in this 1 year of doing this Blog Talk Radio, we have many special guests, including Hulk Hogan, CNN analyst. And now, for the first time, as I promised, we're going to bring in Michael Jackson's defense attorney from 2005. Ladies and gentlemen, we have him here, Tom Mesereau. Tom, good evening. How are you?
I'm doing fine. Thank you for inviting me. I appreciate it.
Okay, how is it over there in California?
It's a little rainy today, but everything's fine.
Okay, let me just play a little clip of the verdict, and we'll come back and we'll talk a little about that.
Okay.
In coming out and giving a statement. He's scheduled to make...
Here we go, Jane. The audio feed from the court.
Superior Court of the State of California for the County of Santa Barbara, Santa Maria Division. The people of the State of California, plaintiff versus Michael Joe Jackson, defendant. Case number 1133603. Count 1, verdict. We, the jury, in the above entitled case, find the defendant not guilty of conspiracy as charged in Count 1 of the indictment, dated June 13, 2005, foreperson number 80. Count 2, verdict. We, the jury, in the above entitled case, find the defendant not guilty of a lewd act upon a minor child as charged in Count 2 of the indictment, dated June 13, 2005, foreperson number 80. Count 3, verdict. We, the jury, in the above entitled case, find the defendant not guilty of a lewd act upon a minor child as charged in Count 3 of the indictment, dated June 13, 2005, foreperson number 80. Count 4, verdict. We, the jury, in the above entitled case, find the defendant not guilty of lewd act upon a minor child as charged in Count 4 of the indictment, dated June 10, 2005, foreperson number 80. Count 5, verdict. We, the jury, in the above entitled case, find the defendant not guilty of a lewd act upon a minor child as charged in Count 5 of the indictment, dated June 10, 2005, foreperson number 80. Count 6, verdict. We, the jury, in the above entitled case, find the defendant not guilty of attempting to commit a lewd act upon a minor child as charged in Count 6 of the indictment, dated June 13, 2005, foreperson number 80.
There are only
Count
the
7,
counts
verdict.
now remaining.
We, the jury, in the above
concerning
entitled case,
Did
find the
you use
defendant
alcohol
not
to
guilty
the
of
child?
administering an intoxicating agent to assist in the commission of a felony as charged in Count 7 of the indictment, dated June 13, 2005, foreperson number 80. Count 7, verdict, lesser offense. We, the jury, in the above entitled case, find the defendant not guilty of providing alcoholic beverages to persons under the age of 21, a lesser included offense of that charge in Count 7 of the indictment, dated June 13, 2005, foreperson number 80. Count 8, verdict. We, the jury, in the above entitled case, find the defendant not guilty of administering an intoxicating agent to assist in the commission of a felony as charged in Count 8 of the indictment, dated June 13, 2005, foreperson number 80. Count 8, verdict, lesser offense. We, the jury, in the above entitled case, find the defendant not guilty of providing alcoholic beverages to persons under the age of 21, a lesser included offense that charged in Count 8 of the indictment, dated June 13, 2005, foreperson number 80. Count 9, verdict. We, the jury, in the above entitled case, find the defendant not guilty of administering an intoxicating agent to assist in the commission of a felony as charged in Count 9 of the indictment, dated June 10, 2005, foreperson number 80. Count 9, verdict, lesser offense. We, the jury, in the above entitled case, find the defendant not guilty of providing alcoholic beverages to persons under the age of 21, a lesser included offense of that charge in count 9 of the indictment, dated June 10, 2005, for person number 80. Count 10, verdict. We, the jury, in the above entitled case, find the defendant not guilty of administering an intoxicating agent to assist in the commission of a felony as charged in count 10 of the indictment, dated June 10, 2005, for person number 80. Count 10, verdict, lesser offense. We, the jury, in the above entitled case, find the defendant not guilty of providing alcoholic beverages to persons under the age of 21, a lesser included offense of that charge in count 10 of the indictment, dated June 10, 2005, for person number 80.
Was not guilty.
Tom, could you believe that was 8 years ago?
It's hard to believe. I mean, I get goosebumps every time I listen to that, and as you began to play those verdicts, the goosebumps came back.
Yes, indeed.
Unbelievable situation to be in, and I'll never forget it as long as I live.
Yes. Okay, let's start from the beginning. Michael Jackson arrested in November of 2003. I believe he was filming a video, correct me if I'm wrong, and he was taken in from Vegas to Santa Barbara with his then counsel, Mark Aries. Is that accurate?
Yeah, that's correct.
Okay. So in between that time, I want to say 6 to 8 months passed, and I believe he let go of Mark Aries, and he hired you. Can you tell me how you basically got into this case?
Well, when Neverland was raided in November of 2003, I started getting calls from people close to Michael in Las Vegas asking me to come out and meet him, that he wanted to hire me. And I was defending. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
I was defending actor Robert Blake in his high-profile homicide case. I was returning from a vacation in Northern California, and my phone just started ringing, and I said, I can't do both of them. And then in February of 2004, we started picking a jury in the Blake homicide case, and he and I had a strong disagreement. And the judge couldn't resolve it, and I withdrew from the case. And as soon as I did that, Randy Jackson called me and said, look, we've always wanted you. Johnny Cochran always said you're the one that can win the case. We don't like our current lawyers. We think they're way over their head and can't cope with these prosecutors who've been after Michael for, 12 years or more. And he asked me, are you free? I said, yes, I am. And I secretly flew to Florida to meet Michael. Randy was there. Grace was there for an interview. And it was all done very quietly at a big home that Michael was renting. I was asked a lot of questions about my background and my values and the cases I'd handled and my record and all that. I left not knowing what was going to happen, and then shortly thereafter, Randy called me and said, we want you. So I flew back to Florida, and Garagos was fired, and, everything worked out.
And you say Randy a lot. Now, is it fair to say that Randy was, besides his family, most active in terms of, getting Michael the right, proper legal counsel, getting him right for this trial? Is that fair to say?
Yeah, Randy was running Michael's finances and giving him a lot of direction. I would say, Randy and his mother were the strongest people, the most important people in Michael's life at the time. But Randy was very influential. I had known Randy for years. I had not known Michael. And
how did you meet Randy?
We met socially a number of years before, and every once in a while we would get together and have dinner and laugh. And, I never had done any legal work for Randy or the Jacksons, but he knew me, and he watched the 3-week televised preliminary hearing on the Robert Blake homicide case when I got him free on bail in a case where nobody had ever gotten bail in California before. It was a murder with special circumstances case where he could have faced death, and no one had ever gotten bail in a case like that over prosecution objection. And I kind of hammered the prosecution's witnesses for about 3 weeks and got Blake bail, and Randy was very impressed by that. And he said he always wanted me, and he said, they were very uncomfortable with Garagos. They thought he was way over his head and couldn't win the case.
And we were talking about Garagos' record before we got on the air a couple days ago, and not too great of a record in terms of the amount of years he put in. I'm not saying he's not a great lawyer. I don't know. I'm not in that field, but from what everybody says, from a lot of people I've spoken to in the industry, Garagos is more of a guy that you want if you're in a DWI case, if you're a star and and you need a spokesperson. He's a showman. That's what other people's. That's my hearsay, if you will, from other people. Is that accurate?
Well, Randy investigated Mark for his brother. His brother had a bad feeling. Just didn't think he was right for the case. Thought he was way over his head and not sophisticated enough to handle Tom Sneddon and DA's office that have been building a case for, as I said, at least 12 years. Randy then investigated, or told me he investigated Garagos' background, and Randy's comment to me was he's more famous for being famous than he is for winning trials, and I want someone that's not going to be, intoxicated by the media, someone who can win hard cases. And he said he and his brother spoke to Johnny Cochran, and Johnny Cochran at that time had a brain tumor that, wasn't publicized that it was malignant, but they spoke to him at the hospital, and he told them, I'm just quoting Randy, he said, if I was in trouble, I'd want Thomas Mesereau, and he'll win the case. And I'm very flattered to hear that, because I think Johnny Cochran was one of the greatest trial lawyers ever in American history, and also a very humble, nice man besides, someone I've always admired and looked up to. And to get an endorsement like that was very, very meaningful to me, but that's what happened.
Were your feelings about Cochran solely because of the case he won for O.J., or did you know him before that and after that?
No, Johnny Cochran was a legend in Los Angeles, both as a criminal defense attorney and as a civil trial lawyer before Tyson.
Right.
Numerous criminal cases, numerous civil cases, was highly respected. He'd been number 2 in the DA's office at one point, and just a highly respected lawyer and personality in Los Angeles, known as a very humble, decent guy who really stood up for causes, a man of principle, and just a very gifted trial lawyer. He really knew how to speak to people because he understood ordinary people. And, he, to get his endorsement meant so much to me. We both got awards together. After I got Blake free, we both got awards together in the same evening. I got Criminal Defense Lawyer of the Year, and he got Lifetime Achievement by the Century City Bar Association in Los Angeles. And he got up in his speech and got some very kind words from me, which I really have never forgotten. But at any rate, he also advised, or told me actually, because the last time I saw him was shortly before I moved to Santa Maria, where I lived for 6 months, Santa Maria in northern Santa Barbara County, California, where the trial took place. I met him at his home, and he had he was sort of having trouble walking. He was thin. He had an aluminum cane, and he told me that he did not want Garagos defending Michael, and he was very happy I was in the case. And it was at that time I saw him alive. In the middle of a jury trial, he passed away, and Michael, my co-counsel and law partner Susan Yu, and Michael, the 3 of us went down and went to his funeral in Los Angeles.
That was during the actual trial, right?
Yes. I had asked the judge for permission to go to the trial, and he declined my request. But it just coincidentally, there was no court that day. So we had a limousine. It picked, when Michael was in it, he picked up Susan, he picked up me, and we all went down to Los Angeles to the funeral and came back.
Now, you're representing Michael Jackson. The day you get word that you're going to represent Michael Jackson, is there a little bit of anxiety on your part? I mean, you know how big Michael Jackson is, maybe the top 5 people in the world. Even then, with Muhammad Ali, Michael Jordan, and the Beatles, and maybe somebody that I'm not thinking of right now. Is there a little bit of anxiety, no matter what the charges were?
There was a lot of anxiety because I really didn't know Michael yet, and I approach every case with as much objectivity as I can. I don't believe the prosecution. I don't believe the defense. I have to find out for myself. And I didn't really know him well. The media was just crucifying Michael, claiming he was a molester, talking about settling cases for large sums of money, and he's being vilified in the press, just almost tortured like an animal as far as I was concerned. I did not like that, but nevertheless, I wanted to sit down with him and talk with him and size him up and look at the evidence myself and come to my own conclusions. There was also some anxiety. You know, some friends of mine had warned me not to take the case. They said that you can't win the case, and if you lose it, he's going to go to prison and probably die in prison. And fans all over the world are going to resent you. They're going to, everywhere you go, they're going to say he's the one that's responsible for Michael Jackson dying in prison. And I was hearing stories like that. But nevertheless, I sat back and said to myself, I'm a criminal defense lawyer. This is what I was meant to do. This is the skill and the profession that God gave me, and I made my decision. But sure, there was anxiety throughout that case. Everybody was trying to trip you up. You know, the prosecution had invested so many millions of dollars in trying to convict him. They had a public relations firm. They had the entire, Santa Barbara Sheriff's Department. They had experts everywhere. They were using the FBI in Quantico, Virginia. They were calling Interpol, the International Police Agency, to get information. I mean, they were stopping at nothing to try and convict Michael Jackson. And, of course, he had so many wonderful fans throughout the world who were hoping I could save him. And it was stressful, I have to say, but well worth it. I feel blessed by God that I was even there and that we came through and saved the life of a very wonderful, kind, decent artist and humanitarian. He was one of the most extraordinary people I will ever meet, and I was very lucky to be there, let's put it that way.
Okay, let me play this clip. I believe it's Tom Mesereau.
He's coming out and giving a statement. He's scheduled to make...
Here we go, Jane. The audio feed from the court.
Superior Court of the State of California for the County of Santa Barbara.
Okay, that's not it. Let's try this one.
Very, very kind, extremely sensitive, intuitive, very generous individual.
We had a complainant here who went and consulted with 2 civil attorneys and a psychiatrist retained by the civil attorneys before he ever went to the police.
It was just downright rude to us as far as I'm concerned, and I think she set her son up. I think she's probably the poorest excuse for a mother I've ever known.
You had a family that had made previous grabs for money, making allegations of sexual abuse that were proved to be false in the past.
The proof wasn't there, and I can't say I believe he's a child molester. The proof wasn't there to prove it to me.
The jury was just not going to buy it. The case didn't smell good, and I didn't like the fact that it was brought in the first place.
They're still happy. They're still relieved. They're feeling great.
And our plan was to be extremely aggressive and put them on the defensive as quickly as possible, and I think we achieved that. So we had a lot of good days in this trial, particularly in their case and particularly in our case.
And when they said not guilty for all 10 counts, I felt like the world had been lifted off my shoulders. I was crying all while they were with tears of joy, of course.
They lost the case. This was a family. I sat through this trial. This is a family that crumbled under cross-examination.
They had lied before under oath. They were welfare cheats. They had already exonerated.
If, in my opinion, the prosecution had evaluated the evidence they had before they ran amok, perhaps this would never have cost the taxpayers of Santa Barbara so much money.
The big headlines today, not guilty on all counts.
The media was really having him arrested and executed already, handcuffed already, and say you're guilty for weeks and weeks now.
First of all, there weren't 100 search warrants in this case.
He always was a very straightforward, honest, down-to-earth person to deal with. And the Michael Jackson that I know doesn't even come close to the Michael Jackson they tried to portray.
Second of all, we didn't spend a ton of money.
I'll tell you what celebrity injustice was in this case. It was sending 70 sheriffs to raid Michael Jackson's home in a search. It was putting more experts, more sheriffs, and more investigators on this case than they do with serial killers.
That's what I call celebrity injustice.
I have given this one passing thought. Once that case ended in 1993 and 94, you're not in touch with reality. I never said one word after that press conference, ever, in 10 years.
Person, and yes, he's been a target for many years. He's been maligned, he's been scandalized, but he's also one of the world's greatest artists and one of the world's greatest talents, and also one of the world's greatest humanitarians. And Michael has all the tools and the skills and the support to recover and go forward and do very well.
This is the bitter pill you're going to have to swallow, Nancy. This is the reality, not the reality you have created for the last year. Michael Jackson is not guilty. Let him live his life in peace and stop trying to retry the case, and that's what you're doing.
You know what? You're right. Replay this back if there's a not guilty verdict, and you can all have the last laugh. Not guilty, not guilty. Replay this back. Replay this back, and you can all have the last laugh. The last laugh, the last laugh, the last laugh, the last laugh, the last laugh. And I will eat crow. I may have to eat crow later. We may be having crow pie together. Well, I'm having a crow sandwich right now. It doesn't taste very good.
I tell you, Thomas Mesereau, Nancy Grace, that brings back memories. She was totally pro-prosecution. Your thoughts on Nancy Grace?
She was so biased against Michael Jackson and didn't know the facts, and really, I think, thought she could influence the jury and influence the verdict in a way that she couldn't. But she was relentless in trying to do everything she could to get him convicted. It was really disgraceful.
Right, and you heard some clips of Tom Sneddon. Now, these are the facts I uncovered. You might tell me if they're right or wrong. Santa Barbara News Press. Authorities have searched more than 100 search warrants. 70 officers raided Mr. Jackson's main residence and office and small apartment, video cave, and video library for potential evidence. Santa Maria Times. The sheriff spent over $3 million on the case. Is that true or false?
I don't know the exact figure, but I think it was much more than that. I think they have not fully evaluated what was spent. They had, everyone in the DA's office working overtime. They had sheriffs off working overtime. They had paralegals and experts working overtime. I don't think they'll ever come clean on just how much they spent to get him. My guess would be $20 million or more, but I really don't know the answer. All I know is that I've never seen a district attorney's office attack someone so relentlessly the way they attacked Michael Jackson, and it was just a tragedy.
Right. Now we're talking about Nancy Grace. I think there was actually people worse than her, a lady by the name of Diane Diamond. Your thoughts on her?
I don't have much good to say about her. She was horribly biased. She had a personal investment into seeing Michael Jackson go down. She really seemed to build her whole career on seeing him convicted and in prison. And I don't know if you ever looked at her face when she's walking out of the courtroom after the acquittal. She looks like a truck has run over her. I mean, she's pale as a ghost because I think she lost her professionalism, if she ever had any. I don't know if she did or not because I really didn't know very much about her. In the Robert Blake case, she actually was very complimentary of my performance. She was working for Court TV at the time. And when I first made an appearance in Santa Barbara, I didn't know her history with Michael Jackson. And she gave me a very odd look. And I remember saying to myself, I wonder what I've done to her. And then I found what the history was, and she kept trying to undermine me every way she could. It was clear she was trying to influence Michael and the family to get rid of me. I don't think she wanted me trying that case. I think she wanted Garagos back because she felt that, he would be a lot easier for the prosecutors to deal with, and he would cater to the media, which I didn't. I shunned the media. They were the enemy. I went to bed at 7:30, latest 8 o'clock every night in my townhouse, and I shut the lights off. I was up at 3 in the morning preparing for court every day. I lived like that for 6 months. I lived like a hermit. And I was not what the media wanted. They wanted lawyers who would live in the hotel and hold court every night and entertain them and give them information, and that wasn't what I was going to do. So she was not happy to see me show up, and I think she was an absolute disgrace the way she relentlessly kept trying to, malign Michael Jackson and try and get him convicted. It was a real disgrace as far as I'm concerned.
And, of course, Maureen Orth. I don't know if you ever heard some of her commentary. Or
she used to sit with him every day in the courtroom. She was just as biased as Diamond. I'm told, I don't know if it's true, that she had a book in the works that went down in flames when Michael was acquitted. And she was just like Diamond. She spent years trying to see Michael Jackson destroyed and convicted. And, I mean, the two of them just looked like cadavers after he was acquitted. I mean, they just were, I don't know if you saw them on TV. They just looked like, again, a truck had run over them. They looked devastated that Michael Jackson, a man who was completely innocent, a decent, kind, honorable person who helped children all over the world, did everything he could to help make the world a better place. They were so miserable that he was not in prison. It was just, I'll never get over that whole experience. It was a very, very, what can I say? I have so many mixed feelings. You played all those clips, and they brought back memories from 8 years ago that I haven't thought a lot about, but they remind me just, how wonderful it was to acquit Michael, to get to know him, to play a role in his life, and they also remind me of what a tragedy it was to put him through all this, because he had to be in court 5 days a week for 5.5 months, listening to this, this horrible, horrible testimony. People trying to suggest he was like a vicious mobster who ran a conspiracy to abduct children and then falsely imprison a family and commit extortion. He had to listen to these horrible tales of child molestation that were completely false. And, there's sadness there, too, when I think about that. I have a lot of mixed feelings about the entire chapter, but I'm very grateful to God I was there to acquit him, and I'm very grateful that the jury saw the truth and did the right thing.
Let's talk about somebody positive in that trial that doesn't get much attention here in the U.S., and that's your co-counsel, I believe, Susan Yu.
Susan Yu is one of the most brilliant lawyers in the world. When I went down to Florida to interview with Michael and Randy and some others, one of the ironclad conditions I laid down was that Susan Yu has to be my co-counsel. I don't want the case unless she is there, because there's no one more brilliant, there's no one more honorable. She analyzes the evidence from A to Z. She's a compulsive worker. She's a good person. And I was just fortunate she was there day in and day out, because she was the only lawyer I fully trusted.
Really?
Everyone else had an agenda. There were some lawyers who had done previous work for Michael Jackson who resented the fact that I was his lead counsel, and I never knew if they would go to the press behind my back and try to undermine me, and some of them actually tried that. I found investigators at times were trying to promote themselves in the media and leak things to try and be stars and celebrities, and it was just a very treacherous environment from A to Z. But I knew that with Susan, there was someone I could trust, who had total integrity, total professionalism. We would not have won this case without Susan Yu working morning, noon, and night, marshaling the evidence, going through the details. She had instant recall where any document was, where any fact was, and thank God she was there as my co-counsel. And, of course, as you know, we're law firm partners. We were before that, and we still are. But, boy, was Michael lucky to have her. And she really, doesn't like to do much with the media. I think she gave one interview after it because the Chinese media had flown a crew of people over and made a big investment, and she felt bad that they flew everyone over to talk to her. So she gave them an interview, but she dodged everything else. She is not someone who wants to promote herself in the media. She lets the results of her cases speak for themselves, and she's got a tremendous record in civil and criminal litigation.
Okay, a little bit about the case. The case starts, I believe, late February 05, right? February 28th?
Actually, it was January 31st. The case officially started.
Was
and
that a jury?
We had to have most. Pardon me?
Was that picking a jury?
Yes, yes. You start off with, pretrial motions. You then pick a jury. And the jury got picked fairly quickly. I left
I'm sorry, did you have a jury consultant?
I had a jury consultant, but quite frankly, I didn't listen to a word she had to say. I think good trial lawyers who are experienced follow their intuitions and their instincts. If you try lots of cases and if you have, a reasonable amount of talent, you start to understand what kinds of people will resonate with you, what kinds of people will resonate with your client and the evidence. And conversely, you're looking for jurors who you think will see through the prosecution if they're trying to put on a bogus case like the Santa Barbara prosecutors did. So there are a lot of human considerations that go into picking a jury that I think only experience and the hard knocks of the courtroom can teach you. And jury consultants can be helpful. They can get some data together. But in this case, I really rejected everything she had to say. For example, she didn't think women were going to be, great for Michael Jackson in that case. And I told her, well, thanks for telling me that, but women are what I want, and we had a majority of women.
Right.
At least for that portion we did.
Right. Now, they cost a lot of money, I was told, by a prominent CNN correspondent lawyer.
Well, they can, depending on which one you hire. And I can't go into what it costs. But basically what I had her do was, I had never tried a case in Santa Barbara County, which is north of Los Angeles County where I live.
Right.
And so I wanted her to conduct a phone survey and get information on just, people's attitudes in Santa Maria and the locality where the case was going to be tried. And she did that, and she tried to put together a profile of an ideal juror for the prosecution and an ideal juror for the defense. And she would break it down by race, by age, by occupation, by the part of town you live in, political affiliation, etc. And then she tried to figure out what most influenced each juror. So it was interesting information to have. Particularly since I'd never tried a case in that county, but the most important thing, or one of the most important things I did, was I just drove up there, in my jeans and my black leather jacket, and I used to hang out at bars and restaurants alone, just mind my own business.
Right?
And somebody would come up.
Undercover.
Well, not so much undercover, just sitting there minding my own business, and then people would figure out who I was and come up to me, and then I would start chatting, and I'd ask them, what do you think of Michael Jackson? Because, the press was saying that this is a very pro-conviction venue, a very pro-conviction courthouse. And
had a high prosecution rate in terms of...
Very high conviction rate. But people would come up to me, they were always either white or Latino of various ages, and I would ask them, what do you think of Michael Jackson? And they would say, we like him. He's a good neighbor. He doesn't bother anyone. He employs people. We like to see tourists come to Neverland. He's a gentleman. He's a kind person. They didn't like those allegations, but I got the feeling that they were going to be very fair and open-minded. And I also got the feeling that they didn't necessarily buy Tom Sneddon. So, a lot of these so-called pundits and experts on TV were saying I should try and get the case moved out of Santa Maria, and I came to my own conclusions. I want to stay right here. He has a lot of people that like him in Santa Maria, and they're fair people. So that's what happened.
And what about Judge Melville? Just before, obviously the verdict, what were your thoughts of him specifically?
Well, I like Judge Melville personally. He treated me very professionally, and I think he made some very fair rulings. On balance, he was pro-prosecution, let's face it. Anyone who watched him in that trial knows that he was giving the prosecution every break he could. But by the same token, he gave us a couple of fair rulings. So I'm not going to say he was pro-defense. He wasn't. He was pro-prosecution. But he treated me in a very fair way and my team in a very fair way. Some of his rulings I truly disagreed with, particularly that ruling at the end where he allowed the police interview Gavin Arvizo to be played to the jury. There was no basis for that, and I thought that was just throwing a life raft to the prosecution.
What about 1108? You know what I'm talking about.
California is a rough state when it comes to evidence of what they call prior similar acts. And a lot of people in other states shake their head at California for letting that kind of evidence in. It's very prejudicial evidence, but Judge Melville went further than I ever expected him to. He allowed them to bring in witnesses saying they observed Michael molesting other children without their having to bring the actual children in. And I thought that was a very unfair ruling, very prejudicial, I thought, to the defense. But nevertheless, he allowed that. He also allowed the prosecution to bring in evidence that he had settled other cases, which I didn't think was properly, in that courtroom. But nevertheless, look, we prevailed. The truth won out, and I'm very grateful.
Okay, yes. Let's talk about some of the people involved in the case. They called Martin Bashir, who is infamous for making that horrible documentary about Michael Jackson, and I believe he got scolded in the UK. Correct me if I'm wrong.
Well, he was from the UK, as I understand it. He charmed Michael Jackson into thinking that he would put together a very fair and balanced and honest documentary about him. And he knew Michael had a soft spot for Princess Diana. Michael always revered Princess Diana because he saw her as someone who could have just lived a comfortable life of royalty and instead had a conscience. She wanted to help children around the world, children in Africa who were starving, children who had AIDS, children in Eastern Europe who were the victim of landmines. And he revered Princess Diana. So Bashir manipulated Michael, in my opinion, and preyed on his soft spot for Princess Diana. And you use the word infamous. I think that's too kind a word. I think the man's scum.
There you go. That's better. Yes, but nevertheless, he was the first witness. And is it true that he tried to hide behind his own lawyer during the case?
Yes, he did. He was their first witness. He was a disaster for them. He had his high-priced lawyer from Los Angeles in the courtroom instructing him not to answer most of my questions. And he was hiding behind what is called a journalistic privilege, meaning that, a journalist's sources don't have to be revealed. They're privileged. And there's some other nuances to that rule of law that allowed him, he thought, just to repeatedly hide. So I don't think he realized that it was turning off the jury when he kept refusing to answer questions. But by the way, a lot of people don't know this. When Michael passed away, I was in the middle of a jury trial in Los Angeles with Susan Yu. I called into my office, and one of the first messages I had was from Bashir, telling me that he never meant any harm, that he always admired me, and if I wanted to talk to him, he left his number. And, of course, I never returned the call.
Really? So you got a message? That's how you really ultimately found out?
No, I was walking out of the courthouse and actually Randy Jackson's girlfriend was there and told me, and then some sheriffs at the entrance to the courthouse also told me. I was hoping it was just another rumor because Michael was always plagued by these crazy rumors, and I was hoping this was another one, and unfortunately I realized it was not. But I called up my office, and of course my message machine was full. But one of the first ones was Bashir, hoping I would talk to him and saying he never meant any harm. I'm a great guy. He's sorry for, Michael's passing. And to me, it was just another manipulative ruse to try and get, me to talk to him. And I assure you, I've never called him and never will.
Yes, and I know a lot of Michael Jackson fans appreciate that. Also, they called to the stand the mother of the accuser, and by all accounts, she was nothing more than a disaster. You say what to that?
She was a total disaster, and I did something very unconventional and unusual. I just let her talk and talk and talk. And, a lot of conventionally trained lawyers would have stopped her rambling on and asked the judge to, make her just respond to questions. I didn't want to do that. I wanted her to talk and talk, because the more she talked, the more she revealed who she was, the more she turned off everybody in that courtroom, including the jury. And she was a disaster for the prosecution. She really was.
No question about it, and she helped your case in chief, right?
Well, I think she did. That wasn't her intention. She
right.
had in opinion, I think she had memorized certain statements she thought would damage Michael Jackson. You know, she had this sort of rehearsed litany of adjectives, you know, that and descriptive devices. She would say Neverland was a haven for booze and pornography, and she kept saying it, and it sounded so wooden, so rehearsed. I wanted her to keep saying it because I knew the jury was seeing right through her. It was all such a scam that she was, you know, claiming she was falsely imprisoned and, you know, then had to keep escaping from Neverland, and it just got to be the comedy of the absurd. She definitely did hurt the prosecution. The jurors said that later on.
Now, I don't have the clip, but I did hear Gordon, I don't have his last name, on with CNBC, and they asked Matt Lauer asked him, why did you call the mother? And they said the defense would have called the mother anyway. Is that true?
I think that's true. That's true, because I had a very strong belief that this woman was going to just implode on the witness stand. I felt she couldn't keep her story straight. She had been caught in so many lies before, particularly in that J.C. Penney case. When we got into the case, prior counsel had not subpoenaed her welfare records. I went to Susan and said, we got to get these welfare records because, you know, I have a funny feeling she's not been truthful on them. And she had not been. So there was a long record of perjury and misstatements and misappropriation of funds in that regard. And I just had a feeling watching her in some of these videos we had, and I just said she's going to implode. So that's correct. We would have called her if they hadn't. That's right.
Right, and you know, so she's a witness. There was a rebuttal video that I actually saw on YouTube. Now, there's a part in that clip where she's holding the accuser, Gavin, and she says, quote, are we still on? Is the tape still rolling? And then she's like, Gavin, pick your head up because this is what Bashirs do. And then they try to say that they were, you know, they had to do that tape. If they had to do that tape, she's there saying, are we still on? And, you know, smiling. And you know what I'm referring to?
Yeah, I know exactly what you're referring to, and I played it 5 times for the jury. Every member of the Arvizo family was forced to look at that tape and answer questions about it. And by the time that trial ended, I think the Arvizo family had absolutely no credibility with that jury at all. They didn't believe a word they had to say.
Exactly. So you get to your closing argument. So how many days was the jury out? Was it 5 business days?
They went out on a Friday afternoon, I believe, and they came back a week from the following Monday. So
and that was
there was a Friday afternoon, I believe they got the case. We had the weekend. Then they went through the next 5 days of that week. We had another weekend. I believe it was the following Monday that they came back with a verdict.
And you were confident all along, right?
Well, I was confident, but nervous, as you can imagine. The world's eyes were upon us. I mean, I think in every world capital, because Michael Jackson, in my opinion, was the best-known celebrity on the planet, you know, life stopped in every capital, Times Square. I mean, I don't know if you've seen the footage of that. People are just stopped on the street looking at what happens. So I was nervous, but I also was very confident. I felt that the truth and morality were with us. I felt we had put on a very good case. I felt we had really exposed what liars so many of these witnesses were. And I didn't think they would get 12 jurors to ever convict them of anything. I didn't know if we would, you know, it takes 12 jurors to convict or acquit. And there were a couple of jurors I felt very confident about just by watching their body language. There's some other jurors I wasn't so sure about. I just didn't know. But deep down inside, I felt God was with us. I felt we would win, and Michael would be vindicated.
During the trial, I believe you told us to Larry King, correct me if I'm wrong, I think your sister had unfortunately passed, and Michael brought her some roses or something to that effect?
Yes, he did. It was a few months before the trial started. My sister was diagnosed with terminal cancer. She had brain cancer and lung cancer. She was a year and a half younger than me. It was a very, very stressful situation. When Michael heard she was seriously ill, he called me up very concerned, and Grace called up, his nanny called up very concerned, and my sister had the brain tumor removed first, and it looked very promising. The neurosurgeon who operated on her thought she had come out of it very well, and she wasn't experiencing the vision problems and balance problems that typically accompany removal of a brain tumor. And so he released her from the hospital. She was going to have her lung tumor removed about 10 days or 2 weeks later. She went home, and there was a bouquet of flowers larger than the door. And she said she'd never seen a bouquet like that, and she had no idea where it came from. And it was a little envelope, and she opened it up, and there was a little poem that Michael had written for her.
Wow.
She was just ecstatic. She was floored. She couldn't believe it. Unfortunately, she then had the lung tumor removed, and she died right after the trial started. We had to interrupt jury selection so I could go down and tend to her affairs. But I'll never forget what Michael did for her. That was just, it was typical Michael. It wasn't just she that he did it for. He always tried to help people whenever he could. Children.
So he actually had an effect on you. Would you say that's fair to say, in terms of being a good citizen? And I think he had an effect on you, on me, on everybody that speaks of him in a kind way. That is,
I've always said that somebody with that fame and that money could have simply bought, a mansion on the French Riviera, or a mansion in Beverly Hills, and just entertained and had fun. But this man wanted to change the world. He couldn't just take his money and his fame and just be selfish and narcissistic. He really wanted to change the world. And he did his best to do it through music, through kindness, through inspiring words. He did everything he could in his short life to make the world a better place. And, all I can tell you is the way he touched my sister that day was, I'll never forget it.
Yeah, and I just wanted to, the thing he was charged with is being a pedophile. Now, these pedophiles, whether it's from the Catholic Church, whether it's Sandusky, there's a trail of victims anywhere from 50 to 100. I read up a lot about on that. Now, 2, 3 accusations, and all of them wanted money, these people. That doesn't really go to that theory of Michael Jackson being a pedophile.
No, and the prosecution had worked very closely with an FBI expert on pedophilia, and they chose not to call him as a witness. And I think they didn't call him as a witness because they thought he would be shredded on cross-examination for many reasons, including what you just described. When you think of the thousands and thousands of children that visited Neverland, when you think of all the children he visited around the world at hospitals, and you've just got a handful of people who allegedly were molested, and I say a handful. Remember, there was the Arvizo kid, and then the prosecution claimed that another 5 had been molested, and my first 3 witnesses were 3 of those 5 who said he never touched us.
Right.
It was just ridiculous. And, of course, the 4th one, Chandler, apparently fled the country, didn't want to testify. And then they brought the 5th one in who claimed he was tickled outside of his jeans. And, of course, his mother wanted money and he wanted money. And they sold stories to tabloids. And, it was just...
the maid, right? The mother of the son of the maid?
Yeah.
Francia?
Yeah.
Jason Francia?
That was his name, yeah.
Right. So you had that. So that's what, I was watching Chris Cuomo, and after the Sandusky sentencing was done and everything was done with that, they showed a cop talking to Christopher Cuomo on his show back a few months ago, and they said, listen, we only have one kid that's accusing Jerry of doing this at that particular time. And I'm saying to myself, one kid? There was only one kid, one principal kid that was accusing MJ at that time. So, that really bothered me.
Well, it bothered me, too, for the most important reason it bothers us. It's completely false. It was just fabricated. He was a target. He was perceived as very wealthy and very vulnerable. And everybody in the prosecution office, in my opinion, wanted to profit from this thing. You know, they may have convinced themselves that he was guilty. You know, only they know the answer to that. But the case was bogus. It was fraudulent. And it helped, you know, it just helped to harm a very, very decent, kind person who really wanted to just do good for the world. That's what he really, truly wanted to do. He felt that art was a vehicle to heal the world. He felt that kindness was a vehicle to heal the world. He thought his example to others was a vehicle to heal the world. And to take children who he thought he was able to help in many different ways and charge it with this horrific crime of child molestation, which I think to the public is worse than being charged with murder, quite honestly.
Right.
It was a drug addict. Right. It was one of the most cruel injustices I've ever seen.
And, you know, like the outtakes of what Bashir said, you know, you're like one of the most kindest thing. It's like it's a spiritual thing. He said on the outtakes, and then on Nightline he said something to the effect of, I felt terrible for the kids. They were in danger, you know, blah, 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 blah. And it was just so different than the rebut one from Maury Povich, if you remember.
No, he was just manipulating Michael, using him for career advancement, using him to make money. It was awful. I don't really even like to think about that guy. He's so horrendous, so ugly, so I can't find the right words to really adequately tell you what he was like. I think he was just satanic. I think he was just cruel, and I think he used poor Michael for his own purpose.
Okay, let's play a clip of the Reverend Al Sharpton at his book. Right after the trial. This is after the trial. They're going to question Mr. Reverend Al Sharpton. Definitely how he answers these questions with commentary.
Hello?
Yes.
Oh, okay. Did you have a question? I couldn't.
Yeah, this is going to get.
You're talking about when you marched up to Sony Music headquarters with Michael Jackson, and he referred to Tommy Mottola, the chairman at that point of Sony Music, as a, quote, a racist and very, very, very devilish.
But I clearly agree with Michael that there was a lot of problems with particularly black artists in the industry, still is, and a lot of people have been undermined. And I think that began a lot of Michael's problems in the music industry.
Well, I don't personally see a racial component to the story, but since you brought it up, I wonder what you make of the fact that he was acquitted on all charges, even the misdemeanor charges, by what was essentially an all-white jury. It had no black members. I believe there was an Asian woman and at least one Latino man, but it was not particularly a jury of color. Does that strike you as odd?
No, I think that's good. I think it showed that this jury was able to rise above all of that, but I don't think that this is a model to say that people should have all-white juries and that people should not be judged by their peers. I happen to think these 12 jurors did a tremendous service to the American criminal justice system because they clearly said at their press conference, they were not there as fans, they were not even there with people that didn't have doubt, but they didn't feel the evidence met the level that it should.
You just said that Michael Jackson should have been judged by a jury of his peers. I've wondered this the whole time. What would a jury of Michael Jackson's peers look like?
What would a jury of Paris Hilton's peers look like?
I don't know, but one celebrity at a time here.
What does anybody's peers look like? I think that we clearly in the criminal justice system have a broad understanding of peers in terms of people's racial background, in terms of people's a similarly situated situation, and I think clearly we know where Michael Jackson would be there. Again, all of us can get off jokes, but when we're talking about something as serious as people going to jail, I think we should respect the criminal justice system and the risk of someone being wrongly convicted.
or as serious as the molestation of children. Now, you were...
Absolutely, which is why none of us interfered with the trial. The trial ran its course, and 12 jurors said not guilty.
Right.
And the American media needs to get over it.
It doesn't, of course, mean that they reached the right decision. O.J., for instance, obviously guilty and still got off. But let me just ask you this
Obviously
question.
guilty to who? That jury said not guilty. You know, when we fight cases and juries come back, Tucker, when we fight cases and juries come back, you tell us to accept it. Okay. Let's get straight in the situation from the first night. We must have one stand.
Let's talk about the future for a sec. You were in the music business for a while. You worked with James Brown. We're a producer. You know a lot about it. Do you think Michael Jackson has a future in pop music?
Absolutely. I think that Michael Jackson has artistic expertise. I think that, if anything, sometimes a lot of the hidden and sometimes latent talent comes back under adversity. I would not write Michael off at all. L.A. Reid, one of the most prominent members of the music industry, said he would bring him out tomorrow. I don't think Michael is washed up, nor should he be.
Now, very quickly, Mr. Sharpton, we're almost out of time, but you just saw a tape there on the screen of Michael Jackson walking and a man holding an umbrella over him. What is that about? Why the umbrella?
I don't know. I've seen people hold umbrellas with people walking down Fifth Avenue in Manhattan. I never stopped and asked them why.
But not people wearing epaulets and dark glasses. Reverend Al Sharpton.
Maybe they're hiding from the sun. I don't know.
Tom, your thoughts on the Reverend Al Sharpton?
What do I think?
Your thoughts on that commentary?
Well, I mean, look, what a lot of people didn't fully appreciate was that Michael Jackson brought every race together. So when you say, what's a jury of his peers, Michael Jackson brought every racial, ethnic, religious group together. Okay? And he wanted to do that. He was a black man from a prominent black family with 2 white children, with 1 Latino child. He was very vocal that he wanted to adopt a child from every continent, Asia, Africa, the Middle East. I mean, Michael Jackson loved the world's people, and the world's people responded and loved him. And if you listen to his music, it's music designed to heal and bring people together, not divide them. And when I got to know him and got to know that community, I remember saying to myself, you know, understandably, his family and a lot of his advisors think, you know, we need black jurors. But I said, we don't need black jurors, you know. All we need is jurors we think are going to be fair, because everybody loves this man. Everybody relates to his message. And, you know, white people can be very sensitive about racial issues because, you know, discussions of race in America don't bring white people to a very good place because of the horrendous history of slavery and injustice and discrimination and humiliation. But, you know, white people resonate with Michael Jackson's message, which is that we're all human beings. We should all be kind to one another. We should all understand each other. And in Neverland, one of the first things I noticed was these paintings in Neverland, which had Michael, and there were lines of children behind him from every part of the world in their native costume. I mean, it just, you had to see these paintings to understand this man brought everyone together. He loved everyone, and people responded. So I didn't need, you know, Reverend Sharpton was talking about a predominantly black jury when he said a jury of his peers. I know what he was talking about. But when you get to know Michael Jackson, every kind of person on the planet was his peer. That's the kind of extraordinary human being he was.
Okay, coming up, well, your thoughts, June 25th, 2009, you must have got called from every outlet in the country. How did you get, what was your feelings about that?
You know, as I said before, at first I was hoping it was not true, that it was just another rumor. When I realized it was true, I had just a very, very deep feeling of sadness that an extraordinary person had died, you know, so young. And it just was deep sadness. You know, I just felt that, you know, despite all of his wonderful gifts and all of his accomplishments, I felt that Michael had trouble trusting people. He was such a target for all kinds of people to exploit him, to get money, to get projects, to do this, to do that. And, you know, I just felt so sad that he had been wounded the way he had, you know, during the chapter when I knew him, you know, best. At the same time, again, as I've said before in the show, I felt very blessed by God that I was there during a very difficult time. and that I could participate in that chapter in his life, which, while it was horrible for him and sad and painful, I was lucky to be there, and I feel very fortunate that I knew him the way I did, that I could help him the way I could, and I'm a lucky man that I knew Michael Jackson.
I believe you went on the Jay Leno show, right?
Yes.
And you knew he was making fun of MJ throughout the trial, though, right?
Yes, and here's what happened. Leno wanted me on the show, and I said no. And his producer had been a friend of mine for many years. In fact, I used to take her to lunch when she didn't have a job. And she called me up, and she said, look, lay down some conditions. And I said, well, first I'm going to check with Michael and Grace and see if they want me on it. So I checked with Michael and Grace, and they wanted me to go on. And I laid down some conditions. I said, you can't tell a joke about him in front of me when I'm interviewed. And Leno agreed he would not do that. And he agreed that he would let me give our position. And with those conditions and with Michael and Grace, not only approving, they actually wanted me to get on there and give our side. So I changed my mind. Originally, the answer was absolutely not. And when I found out Michael and Grace wanted me on the show, I agreed to do it.
Very interesting. Okay, AEG versus the Jacksons. Let me play this clip, and we'll talk on the other side. Randy Phillips.
Michael insisted on hiring Dr. Murray because he told us he was his personal physician, and he told one of our general counsel, outside counsel actually, who was drawing the agreement for the doctor to do the work, that he had been Michael's personal physician for 3 years. And then Michael told me, because I took one shot at getting him to let us hire an English doctor, and he said, you don't understand. Okay, my body is the machine that fuels this business, and I need personal care, and I want a doctor 24/7, like President Obama would have, and then this is my doctor. I need a doctor 24/7. He makes me feel good about myself. I want this doctor. At that point, I said, you got the doctor.
And did you not realize that perhaps he wanted him because he was giving him prescription drugs that he should not have had?
To be honest with you, I wasn't that involved in this process, and no, we just knew he was a cardiologist and he's a doctor he wanted, and Michael's strong. And, Michael wants something, we never even thought about that, to be honest with you. It never even crossed anyone's mind. We just felt this is his personal doctor, he wants him 24/7, and the guy's willing to leave his practice for a very large sum of money, so we hired him. At that point, I said, you got the doctor. So we hired him.
Did you hear that clip? We hired him.
I did hear it. Look, here's the situation as I view it. Maybe Michael Jackson introduced AEG to Conrad Murray, but AEG assumed the responsibilities for Conrad Murray when they employed him. And the theory behind the civil case by Catherine and Michael's children is that AEG negligently hired, supervised, and retained Dr. Murray. They assume responsibility for him. If you look at those emails, they're reminding him who's paying him. They appear to be putting pressure on him to make Michael show up for performances. And also their co-chief executive officer was one of Michael's managers in the 90s and knew apparently that other doctors had gotten Michael addicted to prescription drugs. And so they were put on notice, you need a special kind of physician to treat Michael Jackson. He may like this doctor, he may have introduced you to the doctor, but given your knowledge, you need to make sure that the proper doctor is there to treat him well. And from my point of view, they assume responsibility when their lawyer drafted a contract, sent it to Murray, Murray signed it, sent it back. Their emails say that they now have assumed responsibility for this, and I think they're liable. I'm pulling for Catherine and the children. As you know, I'm a I'm on the plaintiff's witness list, so I'll probably be testifying because the defense lawyer for AEG wants to bring in evidence that he was charged with molestation.
And the judge is letting that?
Huh?
The judge is allowing that? Is that relevant?
The judge is allowing it. The plaintiffs, Catherine and the children's lawyer, tried to prevent that, and the judge said she's going to let it in. So they then asked me, would I be willing to testify for them to what happened in the trial, the fact that he was acquitted 14 times, 10 felonies, 4 misdemeanors, and also to the fact that after the trial, I got a very warm reception around the country when I went to speak. People of all ages, all races were coming up and shaking my hand. There was no negative reaction. There were a couple of disgruntled people, I'm sure, but the reaction to me was very, very positive.
Right, definitely. Let me play you this clip of Dr. Murray on Anderson.
Hey, you know what describes me, Anderson? Let me sing something for you. This is important to me. He's a little boy that Santa Claus forgot, and goodness knows he did not want a lot. He wrote a note to Santa for some crayons and a toy. It broke his little heart when he found Santa hadn't come. In the streets, he envied all those lucky boys. But goodness knows he didn't want a lot. I'm so sorry for that laddie who hasn't got a daddy. He's a little boy that Santa Claus forgot. That song tells my story. That's how I grew up. I had no Christmases. I had no toys. I had nothing. I walked barefooted for years. But as I grew up, my heart has been whole, and my heart says to help. And all I do is to give. I want to give.
Tom, your comment on that wacky video, I mean, that's out of line.
Well, I can't stand Dr. Conrad Murray. I think he's a vain, selfish, narcissistic, self-centered loser who had no concern for his patient, Michael Jackson. His only concern was making money and having a good time. And he violated his medical responsibilities. He violated the law. He caused the death of a wonderful human being, and he's right where he belongs, Los Angeles County Jail, as far as I'm concerned.
And he never, ever took responsibility, and he claims he'll never, ever will take responsibility.
No, he won't. He blames Michael. He blames Michael for what happened. He refuses to look within himself. He refuses to look in the mirror and acknowledge what he did. And, you know how little I think of him.
Absolutely. Okay, let's turn to a different case. It's the Jody Aries case. The jury deliberated for 7 hours, 32 minutes, and 59 seconds. From that standpoint, is that good for the defense or for the prosecution?
Well, I think the longer it goes, theoretically, the better it is for the defense, but you never really know. I've seen juries come back with quick verdicts for the defense and also quick verdicts for the prosecution, and I've also seen lengthy deliberations where they convicted. I'll say this. I think the defense in that case has done an extraordinary job. This was a very difficult case to defend. You know the time of death, the cause of death, the place of death. The cause of death is horrible. It's 29 stab wounds. She slit his throat from ear to ear, then she shot him in the head. It's a very difficult case to defend, but I think these lawyers have really cared about their client. They've dug deeply into her background, her upbringing, her emotions, her psychological and psychiatric makeup. They prepared her to testify for weeks, and regardless of what happens, they've done an excellent job. Let's compare that to a few other cases. Look at Casey Anthony. Now, Casey Anthony was also a horrible, horrible death. The death of a little child, but you didn't really know the place of death, the cause of death, or the time of death. You also had a defense attorney in that case that got to know his client, humanized the client from his opening statement. Then look at Scott Peterson. Of those three cases, Scott Peterson was the easiest. In Scott Peterson, you couldn't prove the time of death, the place of death, the cause of death. You had a handsome guy with no criminal record. But Garagos, in my opinion, didn't belong in the case. He never showed up for the verdict. He got up in the penalty phase when he had to argue against the death penalty and told the jury he was not prepared. I got to tell you, Scott Peterson was convicted after Garagos was fired by Michael and Randy Jackson. And when Scott Peterson got the death penalty, Randy and Michael called me and said, "Thank God we got rid of Garagos." I mean, they really.
Are you serious?
I'm serious.
Oh my. Okay, you're talking about lawyers. Take a listen to this prosecutor, and we'll come around this 2-minute clip of Juan Martinez, and we'll come and talk
The
about
fight over Snow White. If you didn't see it, you're going, what the heck are you talking about, Christy? Alice Levilat gave a domestic violence seminar, apparently. It was called, Was Snow White a Battered Woman? Juan Martinez tried to make a connection between that seminar and Jody's story. Now, Levilat wasn't having it. Here you go.
Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs is a fairy tale by the Brothers Grimm, right?
Yes.
And in it, we have an individual, that's the king, right, who is married and has a kid, and they name her Snow White, right? Yes or no?
I'm not using the Brothers Grimm version. I'm using the Walt Disney cartoon. I just want to make that clear.
And one of the things that happens after that is that the father sends her away, correct? She goes into the forest, right?
Objections are relevant going this far into the Snow White story?
Overruled.
Right? She chose to leave. Why? Why do you believe that she chose to leave?
Objection, relevant speculation. Very tough.
Overruled.
And she lived in what can be best described as less than ideal circumstances, right?
Correct.
And the same thing with Snow White, right? She lived in a situation with less than ideal circumstances, right?
She lived with the Seven Dwarfs, and according to the Disney version, she was pretty happy.
Well, she lived in a shack, right?
I thought it was a cute little cottage, Mr. Martinez.
All right. But there's 7 dwarfs that she's living with, right? No one of her own age is there, right?
I don't know the age of the dwarfs.
Well,
I don't. I'm sorry, but I don't.
What I'm saying to you is it your opinion that there were other little kids that would play in the playground with her when she was living with the 7 dwarfs?
Objection, relevant. Argumentative.
Overruled. You may continue.
In fact, she was just there cooking and cleaning, right?
Well, she was talking to the birds and singing with the animals.
And cooking and cleaning for the dwarfs, right?
Correct.
Basically, what's going on with her is that she's waiting around, right? For Prince Charming, right? Or somebody, right?
She's waiting around?
Well, she's not going anywhere, right?
When she's unconscious?
Right.
Well, when she's unconscious, she's lying around unconscious.
And if we start talking about this issue involving the balance of power, in that particular situation, Snow White has no power, right?
Objection, relevant.
Overruled.
The king has the power, doesn't he?
Objection, foundation. Relevant, foundation, speculation.
Overruled.
That was a light clip of Juan Martinez going at it with the defense witness, Alice Levilat. Did you get a chance to see Juan Martinez in action? And if so, what is your take on his fiery quality?
Well, I did watch bits and pieces of it. You know, I worked during the day, but at night sometimes I would watch some of the coverage. And, you know, he's a very passionate, very prepared prosecutor. He was criticized at times for being too aggressive and too overbearing, but I think on balance he's an excellent prosecutor, did an excellent job. I don't know what the end result's going to be, but it's a very tough death case for the defense. If they can beat the death penalty, they've achieved a victory. If they can get better than that and you know, get a second-degree murder or manslaughter, it'll be an enormous victory for them because the facts are very difficult. But they gave a very, very spirited, passionate defense. And in a death penalty case, which, as you know, I do, you have to learn how to humanize your client. You have to present your client as a human being that deserves some sympathy and some compassion. And as I say, in the Scott Peterson case, the defense lawyer, in my opinion, was not prepared, was inexperienced, didn't show up for the verdict, which sent a terrible message to the jury that he didn't put a lot of value on his client, because that's the kind of message that sends, I believe. And, you know, again, Jody, Aries, Casey Anthony, they were well defended. Scott Peterson, very poorly defended.
And in hindsight, now that we look back, was it a mistake putting her on the stand for 18 days?
No, I think it was a smart move. I think if they hadn't done that, they would have had no chance. I think at least right now they have a chance to beat the death penalty and make sure she's not executed. I think by putting her on the stand, they humanized her, and I think their hope was that some of these jurors will, wonder if perhaps she was abused and was manipulated, and maybe not want to see her executed as some hardcore criminal. I think it was a brilliant thing to do.
And you were happy with his closing argument, Kirk Nemery?
I think it was excellent. I think he's a very skilled lawyer. Really just gave a tremendous defense to Jody Aries. I think both closing arguments were very good. I think they're good lawyers.
And there's one part in his closing where he says, you don't have to like the defendant. He goes, heck, 9 out of 10 days, I don't like Jody Aries. What do you think of that?
Well, I'm not sure if I would have done that, but again, I'm not in that courtroom. I don't have the burden on my shoulders that he had. And she laughed, and apparently there were some smiles on the jurors' faces, and maybe it lightened things up a bit. Maybe it made him look very honest. And I'm not so sure it's anything fatal. I don't think I would have done it, but that doesn't mean it wasn't the proper thing to do.
Okay, do you mind if we take a call?
No, not at all.
Okay, let's go to area code 979. You are on live with Tom Mesereau. Okay, let's go to 706. You're on live with Tom Mesereau.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, hi. Name and where are you calling?
Yes, my name is Sharon Kendrick, and I'm calling from Augusta, Georgia. Okay. And good evening to you, King Jordan, and to Mr. Mesereau.
Good evening. Good evening.
Okay. I have 2 questions for Mr. Mesereau. The first question is, did you believe Jordan Chandler would testify at the 2005 trial? And if so, why or why not?
Well, I was prepared for him to testify. I was not in any contact with him, but I had to prepare under the assumption that all of their witnesses would be on the stand at some point. So I put a lot of time into preparing to cross-examine Jordan Chandler and also a lot of time into learning the facts. And not only did I see a lot of contradictions and a lot of problems with the things he said and did, but I had some witnesses who were ready to testify that he told them that he was never molested. I never had to use those witnesses because apparently he fled the country and refused to cooperate with the prosecution. But yes, I was prepared for him to testify, and as you may recall, the prosecution brought his mother to the stand and brought some other people to testify that they saw him being molested. But the answer to your question is I was prepared to cross-examine him, and I was prepared to impeach him very, very powerfully, and I had witnesses ready to say that he told them it never happened.
Okay. Actually, having his mother testified helped to negate some of the information that was being put out, the misinformation that was being put out by the media. They can't testify because of the settlement. They're going to lose the money. And, of course, with Mom being there, they no longer had that. I have a theory, and I'm not sure whether you can answer it or not, but I've always thought that the reason Jordan Chandler decided not to show up for the trial or would not accept the subpoena and threatened to sue the prosecution if they forced him to testify was because one of your major questions to him would be, how is it with your statement of all the intimacy is that you did not know Michael Jackson was not circumcised? Do you think you would have gone there?
Say that again. My question would have been what? I'm sorry.
Let's get her back here.
Okay, as I said, it's always been a theory of mine that one of the questions you would have asked Jordan Chandler had you gotten him on the witness stand was, how is it with all of this intimacy that you put into your statement, you did not know Michael Jackson wasn't circumcised?
She's talking about what's the penis.
I would definitely have gotten into problems with his physical description of Michael Jackson. I definitely was prepared to go into that because what you said was a major problem with his statement. Yes, you're absolutely correct. I would have definitely gone into that area. Yes.
Okay, let's go to New Mexico. 505, you're next with Tom Mesereau.
Hi, my name is Jane Hatch. I'm calling from Santa Fe, New Mexico.
Okay.
Is that me? Yeah, it's an honor to talk to you, Mr. Mesereau. I can't tell you how many times I didn't watch the original trial, but I've watched it on YouTube, and I can't tell you how many times I saw you, and I thought I'm just, like half of the world or most of the world, just so grateful he had someone of your integrity and your intelligence and your kindness near him, because we all knew it was a circus, and you never know who was going to jump out at this gentle soul that was Michael Jackson. And every time I would see you beside him, I would just say, thank you, God, for bringing this man to Michael Jackson. And I grew up listening to Michael Jackson. I was not a fan when I was younger. I was not a fan. That's probably incorrect English, but I never went to his concerts. But just recently I saw This Is It production on video, and I watched it, and I watched it over and over, and I think I got Michael Jackson. I could feel like my heart opening, and I was astounded. And then I did more and more research and watched more and more of his work, and I realized that he was an incredible human being. And my first reaction was I felt blessed to have shared the planet with him for a short period, and then I felt very sad that the media had robbed the world of this man and who he was. And then I felt, after I got over feeling the sadness, I felt angry towards the media and how they had presented him and basically robbed us of who this human being was as a humanitarian and as a soul that I don't think we will ever see again. So I'm so grateful for you, is what I'm saying.
Well, thank you very much. You've been very kind and generous. And I agree with all of your comments about Michael Jackson. He was extraordinary in so many different ways. Dancer, singer, choreographer, humanitarian. I saw him with his children at Neverland during his darkest hour. The way he interacted with his children and the love and concern that he had for them and they had for him. We all know now he was an extraordinary father in his private life. Extraordinary. Look at the children he raised.
Yeah, you can see it in their faces in Paris and Michael, that they're just extraordinary children that you don't always see as offspring of celebrities. They have humility, they have grace, they have kindness, and they're just a glowing example of who he was as a human being and a father.
Amen. That's what you have to say about Michael. You really captured that.
Yeah, I'm writing about him now. I figure I need to do something to make up. I was a journalist back east. I went to school for journalism, but I wanted to do something, and I'm writing a screenplay. I've heard it would be impossible to get it into the industry, but I really wanted to show the real human being, in some capacity. I don't know where I'll go with it, but it's a passionate goal of mine that I'm pursuing when I can. And so
you just reminded me of a portion of the trial when we were playing the outtakes. The portions of Bashir's interview that Bashir had cut out of the documentary.
Oh.
And there's one portion where I remember Michael mentioned his love for animals, and he said, I love to hug my deer. They never complain. And I remember looking at some of the jurors, and there were tears in their eyes.
Yeah,
he was such a kind person.
Yeah, when I started to, and I got Dancing the Dream and Moonwalking, and I started to read his poetry, and I'm an animal activist too. I think I did cry for like 6 months, the depth of his soul and how he had the most open heart maybe I've ever experienced. I mean, I wasn't obviously ever near him, but I could feel it coming through, and with the animals, with children, with everyone. And so I'm glad he had you. I know he loved his mother, and I'm not sure how he, all the research I've done, I know he had varying degrees of connection with his siblings, but I was always glad to see you in that circus that poor Michael Jackson had to face. So thank you so much.
Well, thank you. I appreciate your very generous remark.
Yes, and Michael was definitely a humanitarian, and we all thank Tom Mesereau. Let's go to Texas, 979. You're next. Okay, they must have hung up. I want to ask you about another show coming up next month, and that is, and it's open all over the media, it's George Zimmerman versus Florida. Your thoughts on that?
Well, it's such a sad case. I believe that Trayvon was racially profiled. I believe that he was attacked by a vigilante who decided he was a wannabe cop, and I believe that he provoked the incident. I believe that Trayvon was defending himself, and I think Zimmerman should be convicted.
That's interesting that you say that. But there is a bombshell in the George Zimmerman case. The state star witness was caught in a lie. Did you hear about that?
I did hear about that, and I can't tell you I know all the evidence in the case. And let's face it, Florida law is very pro-defense when it comes to the issue of self-defense. And, Zimmerman has a good lawyer. He may squeak through this. But as far as I'm concerned, this young black man was profiled. He was targeted. He was harassed. When Zimmerman was told, back off, go away, he didn't do it. I think he provoked the incident. I think he was a wannabe cop with a gun, and I think he should be held responsible for Trayvon's death.
Yeah, a lot of people echo that. And you think if the verdict comes back not guilty, that this could turn into a racist type deal?
I think there is potential for some violence. I think there are going to be a lot of angry people who, if they think Zimmerman, destroyed this young man, destroyed his family, and then got away with it, there is a potential for a lot of tension. I hope there isn't any violence, and I hope there is no tension. But nevertheless, in answer to your question, there is that possibility.
Before we let you go, I heard bits and pieces of that you've done a lot of work pro bono. Can you speak to some of that?
Yes. For many years, I've donated my time to free legal clinics at African-American churches in South Los Angeles. And after the Michael Jackson verdict, when my name was a little bigger, I opened my own called the Mesereau Free Legal Clinic. And it's in South Central Los Angeles. We meet at Morningside Church. And 2 Saturdays a month, lawyers, law students, college students, and activists donate their time to counsel and help poor people who can't afford lawyers. And also, the last 14 years, I've gone into the Deep South and volunteered my time to defend someone facing capital murder charges, and I do that without funds. I've done one case in Mississippi, the rest have all been in Alabama. And,
wow.
And I marched with the women of Watts and their children against gang violence. The projects in Watts, Los Angeles, are very plagued by gang violence and so much tragedy, and I work with the women of Watts, and we do a march every year against violence. I work with an Action Family Network. I'm on the board, which is an organization that helps women in drug recovery and homeless children. And I do what I can. I'm a great believer in pro bono work, a great believer in giving back when we've been blessed.
And you were once a prosecutor, right?
I was, early in my career, and I was a fish out of water. Didn't take me long to figure out that I didn't belong on that side.
Do you feel more comfortable being with the underdog, if you will? Is that more in your DNA?
It's much more in my DNA, and I don't like the arrogant abuse of power either. I love to fight injustice. I love to stand up for people who are being, just oppressed and humiliated in ways that they should not be by a system which allows arrogant prosecutors and police to abuse what power they have. And I like standing up for the underdog. It's much more compatible with my personality and my value system and my emotional makeup.
Yeah, and the other case, before we let you go, in 2001, I believe you defended Mike Tyson.
Well, yes, I got a call from a lawyer in Arizona, a friend of mine who was Mike Tyson's principal lawyer at the time, and he said that Mike had been accused of rape in San Bernardino County, California, by a woman who now was being represented by Gloria Allred. And this was after Mike Tyson had got out of prison. He had been convicted of rape, had done prison time. And I was asked if I would be California counsel on the case. I said yes, and we put together did a quick investigation, put together a booklet of why this woman was lying. We discovered she'd made similar accusations before. She'd used different names. She used fake Social Security numbers. She had a very checkered background. We presented that to the district attorney, and they decided not to charge him.
Wow, that's pretty big. That really wasn't so much as Michael Jackson in terms of media coverage, right?
Well, there was not much media coverage because Gloria Allred gave a press conference with this woman claiming that she'd been victimized by Mike.
Why does Gloria Allred always rush to the media side, and then, like, if the average Joe calls her, it's like this, it's like $350 an hour to talk to her, but she'll do all these other things pro bono as long as her face is being seen on the media. That's the word on the street, at least, about Gloria Allred.
Well, she jumped on us right away without knowing the facts, and once we put together the facts and approached the prosecution, they decided there was no case, and the thing just died. And you were interested in boxing, right? You were once a boxer. Did I read that correctly? I was an amateur boxer in college, but I grew up a boxing fan.
Did you see Mayweather Saturday?
I didn't see the fight. I heard about it. I just wasn't able to watch it. My understanding is it was a pretty good fight, but he was just too skillful.
Yeah, I saw it. It was great. He looked great. 36 years old. He looked 26.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think we'll ever see, in terms of media, in terms of bringing in endorsements, Mike Tyson of the 80s and early 90s, I don't think we'll ever see somebody with video game endorsements, with all that he brought. Would you agree?
Well, I think Mike Tyson, I think he's fundamentally a very nice person. He's made some mistakes. He had a tough upbringing. He was exploited early in his career, taken advantage of. He got out of prison. He hardly had any money. He'd made, I think, close to $200 million before he went to prison. He came out with next to nothing. And he was very angry about a lot of that. But I think he's fundamentally a decent guy. He's trying to turn his life around, and I think he's a good guy. I really do. He's made mistakes, like all of us. There isn't one human being on the planet that hasn't made mistakes or been embarrassed by certain things they did or said. And he's no exception. But I think he's fundamentally a nice person.
And you got a prediction on the AEG trial? Are they going to win?
I predict Catherine and the children will win. I think the law are on their side. I really do.
Well, Tom Mesereau, we planned this about 3 weeks ago. I built it up, and it was so gracious of you to come. You're such a wonderful person, and I mean that from the bottom of my heart. An average Joe person like me, just and acquire a big name like you means so much to me. I can't thank you enough.
Well, thank you very much. I've been honored to be on your show, and you're very kind to invite me. And thank you, for treating me very nicely.
We appreciate it, and you'll come back one time.
I'd love to. Thanks so much.
Okay, Tom.